Part 2, Chapter 10 of Short History of the Christian Church by John Fletcher Hurst. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 10. Moral Life and Ecclesiastical Usages. The morals of the higher clergy were, thus, the darkest feature of the times. The example of the papacy, leaving out Gregory, and now and then another pope, was not favorable to episcopal purity. As many of the bishops secured their office by purchase or political intrigues, the effect of their administration could not be expected to be of an elevated spiritual character. Cincius, 385, was the first pope to order clerical celibacy. Leo the Great, 440 to 461, repeated the decree and extended it to subdeacons. Successive synods gave the same injunction. Gregory VII, however, was the first pope to enforce these laws with inflexible purpose. For in all the countries of Western Europe these ascetic regulations were constantly disregarded. The 10th century was especially distinguished for the general immorality of the clergy. The original jurisdiction of the bishop extended over the matter of all penances within his diocese. But the tendency was to withdraw this lucrative trade from the episcopacy, and let it be an affair for the pope to regulate by special agents. The legates whom the bishops had sent to Rome with reference to penances were clothed with special powers by the popes, and even papal absolution was declared to individuals on whom penance had been pronounced by the bishops. The tendency was to increase the authority of the pope. The nobles were on the side of the bishops. It was the question of a territory against Rome. The Council of Pavia, in 876, declared in favor of the papal anathema as against that of a bishop. The papal management of penances went on with undisguised force. The profits were enormous. They added vastly to the papal treasury, and were in full force down to the time of Martin Luther. The reverence for the Virgin Mary was one of the peculiarities of the times. The rise of chivalry tended to increase the respect for woman throughout Europe. The religious respect for the Virgin had some bearing upon the growing custom of giving woman a larger place in social life. Learned writers indulged in speculations as to the Holy Mother's divinity. She was the Queen of Heaven, the Mother of God, and her praises went far and wide. The miraculous achievements and lofty virtues of some of the pagan divinities of the North, such as Freya, were transferred outright to her. Relics came into use far more than in the preceding period. The pilgrim to Palestine, on his return, brought with him enough sacred relics of the saints to supply a church. Each relic was the centre of a throng of associations, and was supposed to be endowed with great power. The chapel became famous, which could boast a single one. Diseases were supposed to be easily curable by touching a relic. The imagination never had a larger field for play than here. The saints of the whole past were drawn upon to help the ills of the present. The eastern countries furnished many of the most precious relics, but Italy was most productive of the holy manufactures. The Frankish monastery of Centula, for example, was so highly favored that it could boast a miniature cottage belonging to St. Peter, a handkerchief of Paul, some hairs from St. Peter's beard, some souvenirs from the graves of the murdered innocents at Bethlehem, some of the Virgin Mary's milk, and some of the identical wood which Peter did not use, but which he would have used, to build the 3 tabernacles impulsively proposed by him on the Mount of Transfiguration. The church festivals increased during this period. The saints' days grew to an alarming number, for the motives to enlarge the calendar were very strong. The day of commencing the year was changed from Easter to Christmas, though at Florence and Pisa the year dated from March 25th down to as late as 1749. Dionysius Exiguus, A.D. 556, began the year with January. As early as the 4th century, a festival in honor of all the saints was celebrated in the Eastern Church. When the Pantheon was fitted up for Christian worship by Pope Boniface IV. (608 to 615), it was dedicated to the Virgin and all the saints, and its day of dedication, May 13th, was celebrated as a festival for the saints. The origin of All Souls' Day, November 2nd, illustrates the credulity and ignorance of the times. On his return from the Holy Land, a pilgrim gave out that he had seen in Sicily flames bursting out of the earth, and heard the wailings of the poor souls held in durance. These unfortunates implored him, he said, to go to the monastery of Clugny, and to pray the monks to have mercy upon them, and by prayers and alms to free them from their pains. From this time, 998, the abbot of Clugny, Odilo, celebrated the souls of all deceased believers on the day after All Saints, and the practice spread to other monasteries. In the 9th century, the All Saints festival was made general throughout the Church. End of chapter 10.